When you think of cheesecake, New York style probably comes to mind. Rich, tangy, topped with cherries. But in Hungary, there is a lighter, more delicate cousin that most of the world has probably never heard of. This is Rákóczi Túrós, named after a master baker and created for a 1930s Budapest hotel. Every layer has a story to tell. From the tender pastry base to the creamy filling, the apricot glaze, and the lattice work of meringue on top. Today we're traveling to Hungary through its flavors and history and baking a dessert that deserves to be better known beyond its borders. Let's get started. To start, we're going to make a pastry base, and this is sort of loosely based off of a Linzer style dough. Austrian and Hungarian cuisine share quite a few recipes and attributes because of their shared empire and history. And the baker who created this, János Rákóczi, he wanted to celebrate Hungarian cuisine. So he took this Linzer style of dough and added a tablespoon of sour cream to it to give it more of a Hungarian flair. So I'm gonna make this today in a food processor, but this is absolutely something you could make by hand. So for this recipe, you're just going to add some all-purpose flour with some powdered sugar, a teaspoon of baking powder, the zest of 1 lemon, and I'm gonna pulse that all together before I add the wet ingredients. Then add in your chilled and cubed unsalted butter. And I'm gonna give that a pulse actually before I add in the egg yolk and the sour cream. And then finally that egg yolk and a tablespoon of sour cream. So that is the consistency you're looking for. So I've removed the dough from the food processor and kneaded it a few times on the countertop just to bring it all together. It's a very smooth, not sticky dough, so I don't feel like it needs to go into the refrigerator. It seems very easy to work with. So I'm going to immediately roll it out to about the size of my cake pan, which is 9 by 13, and I'm going to transfer it then to the pan. And we're gonna press it into that and prick the top, and then we're gonna bake that before we add the filling. Before you pop this into the oven, you'll want to take a fork and prick the dough so that it doesn't create big bubbles and pockets of air as you bake it, because we're going to blind bake this, meaning we're gonna bake it first before we add the filling. Then you're going to bake it at 375 degrees Fahrenheit or 190 Celsius for 12 to 14 minutes, or until lightly golden around the edges. I try to be as authentic as possible when I'm making these recipes. I do a lot of research, and I often seek out YouTube videos of people from that country that I'm researching making the dessert that I plan on making. So I watched quite a few Hungarian YouTube videos of people making this dessert, and one thing that I noticed when I was watching it is that the apricot jam that they have in Hungary is very different than the apricot jam you can buy here. This has a very sticky, shiny, sugary consistency like you would expect from a jam. When I was watching their videos, it appeared like their jam is more of a fruit butter, something like an apple butter, a pear butter, plum butter, things like that. I thought about making my own, but for some reason where I live, it's hard to find good quality fresh apricots. The grocery store usually carries apricots this time of year, but they're not great quality. They're flown in from California, and they're just too expensive and they don't taste that good. So maybe someday I can make my own, because we are planting an apricot tree in our backyard. But until then, I'm just bought the highest quality apricot jam I could find. This does have large pieces of fruit in it, so I have my immersion blender here, and I'm going to just give it a little blitz and puree the fruit so that I can spread it over the base of the pastry. And it will hopefully be at least somewhat of an approximation of the real authentic apricot jam that you find from Hungary. This did change the consistency of the jam quite a bit, so I'm not sure that I would recommend doing this. Perhaps straining it through a fine mesh sieve would be a better option. And then once you do that, you're just going to spread a thick layer on the base. Now we're getting to the really unique portion of this cheesecake. This is made from a cheese called Túró, which is translated to cottage cheese, but it's really just not the correct translation, because if you've ever had American cottage cheese, it's very much its own thing. It's really just a fresh cheese that you can make at home. Cheese curds would be a sort of way of describing it. It's very similar to farmer's cheese. I can find farmer's cheese here in the US in some grocery stores if they're pretty well stocked and have a somewhat large international cheese section. I can find this brand called Friendship in the United States, and it's sold in a package that looks like this, and it's close to Hungarian Túrós, but it's not quite the same thing. It's a very similar flavor, but I think the Hungarian version is a little bit drier than this. So when I was watching Hungarians make this, I noticed a lot of them took their cheese, which seemed drier and had bigger curds than the one I have here, and they passed it through a fine mesh sieve to make it very fine for this dessert, so there wouldn't be big chunks of cheese curd in the final product. So I'm going to do that today. I don't know how necessary that is with the particular cheese that I bought, but I'm just gonna give it a go for the full traditional experience. This is very much a staple in Hungarian cuisine. It's used in dumplings, pancakes, pastries, it's used as a filling, and that's why János Rákóczi wanted to add it to this recipe, is he was trying to take his knowledge of being trained as both a French chef as well as a Hungarian chef and fuse the two together. He had a bit of national pride and wanted to create a refined Hungarian dessert that featured the different unique aspects of Hungarian cuisine, such as the apricots, the Linzer base with the sour cream in it, and then the filling made with the Túrós cheese, which is very Hungarian staple, and then the meringue on top. Though used in Hungarian baking, it's very much a staple in French cuisine. So that was almost the French spin that he added to these Hungarian ingredients. So to make the filling, you're going to add that sieved farmer's cheese into a large bowl, add your sour cream, sugar, semolina, the zest of a lemon, pinch of salt, your egg yolks, and you're going to mix that all together until really well combined. And it's also traditional, if you want, to add 50 to 60 grams of soaked raisins that have been soaked in rum. It's quite traditional in Eastern European countries to add raisins to cheesecakes, so that's an option. So now I'm going to take this cheesecake filling and I'm going to spread it evenly over the bottom base that has the apricot jam that's been spread on it, and then we're going to pop that in the oven and bake it. Now you're going to bake this layer of the cake at a lower temperature, 325 Fahrenheit or 160 degrees Celsius, for 20 to 25 minutes, just until it's set and has a slight golden tinge to the edges. I've removed the cake from the oven and I've been letting it cool for about 30 to 45 minutes, just so that it's not piping hot when we pipe the meringue on top. You don't want that meringue to melt. So we're gonna move on by beating the 4 leftover egg whites with some sugar to make meringue and pipe that on the top of the cake, and then pop it back in the oven to dry out that meringue. So we're gonna pour this into the mixer, Beat it up until it becomes frothy and then start to add in sugar a little bit at a time. And you're gonna do this somewhat slowly. You want it moving at a somewhat fast pace, your mixer, but not too fast because you don't want to incorporate giant air bubbles. I've had failed meringue before when I whip it at the highest speed and it creates really big air bubbles, and then when you bake it, it creates these little pockets that kind of burst as it's baking. So start it at a medium high. You're gonna go low and then get it up to a medium high speed. You don't wanna go at that highest speed. Now that the meringue is finished beating, it's stiff, glossy. When you take a little piece of it between your fingertips and you rub it together, you shouldn't be able to feel any granules of sugar left. That's how you know your meringue is done, alongside the stiff peaks. And it should also be very shiny, have a really glossy texture to it. Now I have some piping bags and I've put them in tall jars with piping tips at the end of them. Though I don't have a piping tip for this one, but it's not a big deal because I'm not looking for a design for the apricot jam. So I've put my jar of apricot jam in this one, and then right before I use it, I'll snip the end off just so I can pipe it between the lattice that we're gonna create with the meringue. So I'm gonna take the meringue and put it into the piping bag, and we're going to make a design on the top of our cheesecake. You could do any design here really, but it seems that the most traditional is to create a lattice. So I'm just piping the meringue in one direction, and then I'm going to diagonally pipe it in the opposite direction. And you'll see I'm just moving my piping bag back and forth to give it a little bit of a squiggly design to add more visual interest. And then between each of those squares of lattice, I will pipe the apricot jam in between. And then we're going to bake this in the oven to just dry it out and set it. You're going to bake this at 300 degrees Fahrenheit or 150 Celsius for 20 to 25 minutes just to dry the meringue, and you'll want a light golden color on that meringue. Then you're going to let it come to room temperature and chill it before serving. This was a delicious dessert. Unfortunately, I didn't get to film myself trying it, but I will definitely be making it again. I absolutely loved the sweet lemon cheese filling. It was very unique and different than the type of cheesecake that I'm used to here in the United States, and it was a refreshing difference. I really liked it. And I loved the addition of the apricot jam and the meringue on top. That was very unique. Plus, this was so beautiful. It really looked like a dessert that you could find at a professional bakery. So this is definitely something special to serve to guests. I think this would be beautiful, honestly, just for a coffee with friends, but even for something really special like a baby shower or a bridal shower, just because it's so stunning to look at, very impressive on a plate. Now, the funny thing is when I filmed this over a month ago, I didn't know I was going to be traveling to Hungary this fall. My husband and I will be celebrating our 12-year wedding anniversary, and we recently just planned a trip to go to Budapest, Bratislava, and Vienna. And obviously we're going to be tourists there and have fun and enjoy ourselves, but I'm also planning on filming for Bake Across Europe in Europe, and I'm really excited about it. I have quite a few episodes planned and some locals that I'm going to be meeting up with in the different countries, and they will be featured in my videos as well. So if you want to follow along on my trip a little bit more closely and hear some of the details of it, I will obviously be posting those videos to YouTube eventually after my trip, probably 1 to 2 months after I get home. And then they'll be, scattered out throughout the months. I'm not going to publish them all at once. So if you want to hear the details as I'm on the trip, then you can subscribe to my monthly newsletter. I send out a monthly newsletter where I do a deep dive into a European culinary topic, but I also send out weekly, more informal, casual emails where I bake through my cookbook collection and share the recipe with you. But while I'm in Hungary, I'll do something a little bit different because I won't be baking while I'm there. I will just share some details of the different things I get to try and see on my trip. So stay tuned for that, and if you're interested, then sign up below. I'll put the link directly below in the description box. I have 2 other Hungarian recipes on this channel so far. I have Hungarian pogacha and Hungarian non plus ultra cookies. So check out one of those videos next, and I will see you next time.